October 3rd, 2011. Picture the scene. David Swift strolls into his house after a Halloween party. He's probably still half-dressed as a vampire or something, expecting to find his wife Karen hanging out, or maybe folding laundry like a responsible adult. Instead, boom! Karen's nowhere to be found. He wakes up the next morning probably thinking, where the heck is she? Starbucks run. Nope. Turns out she vanished into thin air. Mysterious, right? This is how true crime podcasts are born. The cops show up, and what do they find? Karen's car abandoned on a rural highway with a flat tire, courtesy of a rusty screw. Who knew rusty screws could ruin lives? But here's the kicker. There's no blood, no struggle, nothing to scream foul play at first glance. Just Karen, gone. Naturally, everyone side-eyes David because, let's face it, when someone goes missing, step one, blame the spouse. But wait, who was Karen Swift? She was a 44-year-old supermom in Dyersburg, Tennessee, juggling 4 kids, cleaning houses, teaching aerobics, and generally trying to keep her life from falling apart while holding her family together like an overworked human glue stick. Friends described her as cheerful, self-sacrificing, and the kind of person who'd probably give you the last slice of cake even if you didn't deserve it. Basically, she was living the perfectly imperfect mom life. But her marriage to David? Oof. Let's just say it wasn't exactly a Nicholas Sparks romance. David had, a history. The kind of history that includes an affair. And a bonus baby from someone who wasn't Karen. Yikes. Somehow Karen forgave him because she's a saint, but shocker, their marriage remained shakier than a Jenga tower in an earthquake. Here's where it gets spicy. Just 3 weeks before her vanishing act, Karen had filed for divorce. Yup, she was done with David's nonsense. She wanted independence, freedom, and maybe a break from being treated like a live-in maid. But David, he didn't take it well. Word on the street is, he saw Karen's decision to leave as a personal attack on his fragile ego, and that tension was bubbling like a pot of angry spaghetti. Oh, and get this. A month before her disappearance, David made a major family decision. Without asking Karen, he packed up their entire lives and moved the family from Arkansas to Dyersburg, Tennessee. Because, apparently, democracy is optional in his household. He even bought a house without telling her. Seriously, dude. Karen saw their new home for the first time when they were literally unloading the moving truck. That's not just controlling. That's like saying, surprise, we live here now, and you're not allowed to be mad. David's controlling nature didn't stop there. Karen had started working jobs to support the family, cleaning houses and teaching aerobics. But apparently David wasn't a fan of her working outside the home. Well, he had talked with her, because independence is terrifying to some people. Friends noticed the tension, but Karen kept trying to make things work for the sake of her kids. Then Halloween rolls around. Karen goes out to a party, comes home, tucks her daughter Ashley into bed, and probably crashes herself. By morning, she's gone. The search kicks off, and eventually, her abandoned car shows up on the side of the road. That's when her dream really crashes, because no more perfect days, the glass is blowing, and eventually her abandoned car shows up on the side of the road. The flat tire might have been a convenient excuse, but the whole thing screamed sus. Investigators didn't find immediate signs of foul play in her car or at the Swift residence, but let's be real, this story doesn't exactly scream innocent misunderstanding. As investigators start digging, guess who they zero in on? David. Because his behavior? Sketchy. His controlling tendencies? Off the charts. and his reaction to Karen's independence about as supportive as a cardboard chair. So, what do we have? A mom of 4, juggling way too much. A crumbling marriage that was a dumpster fire of infidelity and bad decisions. A controlling husband who seemed allergic to compromise, a Halloween party, a flat tire, and an abandoned car that made Karen Swift's disappearance feel like the beginning of a dark Lifetime movie. The move marked a turning point in their relationship. David's behavior became increasingly erratic as he struggled with feelings of jealousy and insecurity regarding Karen's independence. Reports indicate that he began stalking her during outings and confronting her about her interactions with friends. This backdrop of tension and control set the stage for the events that would unfold in the following days. Investigators would later scrutinize these dynamics as they pieced together the timeline leading up to Karen's disappearance. In the early morning hours of October 30th, 2011, David Swift contacted law enforcement to report that his wife Karen Swift was missing. David expresses concern for her well-being, indicating that he was worried about her whereabouts. This call initiates the formal investigation into Karen's disappearance. David's report prompts police to take immediate action, leading them to gather information about Karen's last known activities and her interactions prior to her disappearance. As part of the investigation, police began searching for Karen Swift at approximately 3:00 p.m. on October 30th. Officers discovered her white 2004 Nissan Murano, abandoned on the side of Millsfield Highway roughly a /4 mile from the Swift family home. The vehicle has a flat fire caused by a rusty screw, found embedded in it upon inspection. Law enforcement notes that there were no signs of foul play inside the car. Personal belongings, such as her keys and purse, are missing. Forensic testing of the vehicle yielded no evidence of blood or struggle. This discovery of the abandoned vehicle raised further questions about what happened to Karen, led investigators to expand their search into the surrounding areas at home. David claimed that he last saw Karen around 2 a.m. when she returned home with their daughter Ashley. After the Halloween party, Ashley had called her mother to pick her up from a friend's house on her way back. David told the police that both the mother and daughter went to bed shortly after arriving home. During subsequent interviews with police, David mentioned that he briefly checked on Ashley after realizing she was safe. He returned upstairs to sleep. His account of the events raised questions among investigators regarding the timeline of Karen's disappearance and his potential involvement. David also indicated that he was unaware of any plans Karen might have had for the night and expressed confusion about her sudden absence. Witnesses' accounts revealed a pattern of controlling behavior exhibited by David Swift towards his wife Karen Swift. Friends of Karen testified about his jealousy and possessiveness, noting instances where he would exclusively call Karen while she was out with friends. Friends also confirmed that David had a tendency to stalk Karen while she was out. This had led to confrontations of a serious nature in their relationship. These behaviors raised concerns about Karen's safety and contributed to the investigation into her disappearance. As detectives gathered evidence, they noted the significance of these testimonies in understanding the dynamics of their troubled marriage, and David's potential involvement in her fate in the days following the disappearance. David himself would go to the law enforcement authorities and offer his help in finding any trace of his lost wife. One notable thing when he arrived at the local station was his use of crutches. According to him, he had re-injured his KNE, which was operated on a few months earlier. An injury to his knee coinciding with his wife's disappearance, given their troubled marriage, seemed too good to just be a coincidence. On December 10th, 2006, A significant breakthrough occurred in the investigation into Karen Swift's disappearance. Human remains were discovered in a cemetery located less than 3 miles from the Swift family home. The discovery was made by 2 individuals, John Robinson and Mark Rickman, who were visiting the cemetery when they stumbled upon the remains. Law enforcement was promptly notified, and investigators arrived at the scene to secure the area. The remains were later identified as those of Karen Swift through forensic analysis. An autopsy was conducted to determine the cause of death. The medical examiner concluded that Karen had sustained blunt force trauma to the head, which was classified as a homicide. This finding shifted the investigation from a missing person case to a homicide investigation. The autopsy revealed that the trauma would have been fatal if Karen had been alive at the time of injury. However, due to the passage of time since her disappearance, determining the exact circumstances surrounding her death proved challenging. Investigators noted that there was no signs indicating that the murder occurred at the cemetery. Rather, it appeared that Karen had been moved there post-mortem. The discovery of her remains prompted David Swift as a suspect. The nature of her injuries and the location of her body raised critical questions about his involvement in her death. Investigators began to scrutinize David's actions and statements more closely, seeking any evidence that could link him to this tragic outcome. Investigators uncovered that Karen had obtained a second cell phone, which she used to avoid being monitored by David. This phone was kept secret from him, indicating a desire for privacy amid their troubled relationship during their investigation. David claimed he was unaware of this second phone. However, authorities discovered that the number was programmed into his work phone, raising suspicions about his knowledge of Karen's actions. During the interviews with investigators, David appeared preoccupied with Karen's behavior. Rather than expressing concern for her well-being, Detective McCree noted that David's inability to focus on anything other than his wife's alleged drinking and partying habits suggested he might be hiding something. Despite these observations, investigators struggled to find physical or eyewitness evidence linking David to the homicide, causing the investigation to stall in the months following Karen's disappearance. David relocated to Alabama, and remarried. He remained an involved parent to their daughter Ashley, but did not provide any new leads in the case. Ashley expressed a growing desire to understand what happened to her mother, but felt increasingly hopeless about finding answers. Authorities also examined David's claims regarding Karen's behavior after they moved to Dyersburg. He suggested that she had changed due to new friendships, particularly with Bill and Kathy Bona. This narrative was scrutinized, as investigators sought to determine its relevance to her disappearance from December 16th to 20th, 2011. Forensic examinations were conducted at both the Swift home and Karen's vehicle. Investigators found no signs of foul play in the house, but noted some disarray in Karen's bedroom. They discovered 7 gallons of bleach in the home, which David claimed were for cleaning purposes related to a dog poisoning incident involving a neighbor. As the investigation continued in January 2012, law enforcement made public appeals for information regarding Karen's disappearance and death. They sought witnesses who might have seen her or had knowledge of her last known whereabouts. Despite these efforts, the lack of concrete evidence against David hindered progress in the case. While authorities pursued various leads and gathered testimonies that pointed toward David's potential involvement in Karen's murder, they ultimately fell short of obtaining definitive evidence during 2011 and 2012. The investigation remained open as they continued to seek justice for Karen Swift. On August 8, 2022, David Swift was charged with first-degree premeditated murder in connection to the death of his wife Karen Swift. This marked a significant development in a case that had remained unsolved for over a decade. The arrest came as a shock to many in the community, and to Karen's family who had spent years grappling with uncertainty regarding her disappearance. Ashley Swift, SFT, Karen's daughter, expressed her confusion and distress over her father's arrest after enduring years of investigation without a clear suspect. Ashley found it difficult to process the sudden change in circumstances. "I was trying to figure out why," she remarked, highlighting the emotional turmoil that accompanied the news of her father's charges. The context of the arrest was particularly striking for the Dyersburg community. For more than 10 years, residents had followed the case closely, often discussing it amongst themselves as they sought answers about what happened to Karen. The lack of progress in the investigation had left many feeling frustrated and hopeless. Therefore, when authorities finally announced David's arrest, it stunned both family members and community members who had long awaited justice for Karen. Danny Goodman, the prosecutor at the time, believed that all his predecessors could get the case to result in a decisive verdict due to an inadequate approach. He stated that personnel who sought justice for Karen were simply waiting for a supposed key piece of evidence that could help prove that David was guilty. As the case unfolded, it was later learned that such a piece of evidence didn't exist during the investigation. The COVID-19 pandemic broke out, and the entire world, along with Karen's case, came to a halt. However, the prosecutors, instead of stopping their efforts, took that time to review around 30 large bins of files related to Karen's murder. Goodman states that they never found that one big thing that could prove David was guilty. What they covered instead was the fact that the case was very much like a puzzle, with a clear motive. Commenting on the mindset of David, the prosecutor stated, "I think he saw that he was losing control." It was later revealed that throughout the course of their relationship, David was able to control everything Karen did and everywhere she went. However, he noticed that his control over her was starting to slip away. In addition to the loss of control, Ken going out for drinks to party, and an impending divorce all added to his frustration, causing him to plot the murder. The pieces of the puzzle the prosecution put together resulted in a concrete theory that the murder of Karen Swift actually took place. Sharing the details of the alleged crime, the prosecution stated that the murder took place inside the Swift family home. And go on. Then, David staged a series of events to make it look like an accident. The event supposedly took place as follows. On October 30th, when Karen got a call from Ashley, she picked her up. Both of them returned home and had fallen asleep beside each other in the bed. From here onward, David moved Ashley into a different room and then proceeded with his intentions by dragging Karen to the garage, and before moving her, pulled out his gun, violently stomping on her head to make the murder look like the aftermath of an abduction. He loaded Karen's body into the car. After that, he drove to the cemetery where he dumped her body and covered it up to make it look like she had been abducted in the days that followed. David willingly came to the authorities and volunteered to help find his wife's killer in whatever way possible. The prosecution also stated that he would come to the authorities on crutches to emphasize his inability to drag Karen's body. In addition, he showed that he was using the crutches because he had re-injured his knee after undergoing knee surgery that had taken place in prior months. In addition, the prosecutors also refuted the possibility of Karen actually leaving on her own and being abducted. The fundamental basics for such a claim was that several illogical things had to be true. For instance, Karen would have had to have plans of meeting someone if she was going out on her own, but there was no evidence to suggest such thing. In addition, if she didn't go out on her own, why would she wake up David by moving Ashley into another room and moving Kelly from David's bed another? key factor worth considering here is the fact that toxicology reports had shown that Karen had taken Benadryl before going to sleep. Benadryl is a sleeping aid, and if Karen had a plan of going out after dropping off Ashley at the house, why would she take a sleeping pill before she supposedly went out? To add more concreteness to their theory of the alleged crime. The prosecutors provided a lot of evidence, however. It was deemed circumstantial. In addition, the evidence had been uncovered more than a decade ago. A major claim they made rested on the toxicology report, which highlighted the use of a sleeping aid and the fact that phones were inactive after he got them home. They also stated that the information pertaining to Karen's secret phone and David's demeaning comments was a lie, and shared new details up to this point in the trial. It was revealed her secret phone had no activity on it after she had gotten into bed with Ashley. However, a forensic extraction found that the phone had indeed been in use, and a call to the device's voicemail was made. The forensic reports also detailed the fact that the call was made at 9:55 a.m. on October 30th. By this time, several hours had passed, and investigators had not found Karen or her phone. In addition, it was also revealed the phone had been connected to the family's Wi-Fi, and the only adult that was home at the time the call was made would have been David to back their claim of David faking his knee being injured. Again, the prosecution referred to a neighbor's testimony. While speaking to the court, one of the Swift family's neighbors had stated that David helped them move hay bales. The approximate weight of the hay bales was around 60 lb, and the neighbor claimed that David was helping without using crutches. The prosecution had painted a circumstantial theory backed by evidence that showed David had committed the murder. However, the defense refuted such claims. Allegations against David were largely based on the claim that he had been a controlling husband, but his lawyer Daniel Taylor presented a different fundamental perspective and narrative. He stated that David Swift was not a husband trying to control Karen's life, but was one who was simply concerned about his partner. Details about Karen's behavior that were revealed throughout the trial were that she was involved in alcoholism and partying. However, testimonies given by the neighbors had shed much-needed light on Karen's activities during the trials. One of the neighbors had mentioned finding Karen passed out on their sofa, naked, during a party, and David was called to come pick her up. As per the information from the testimonies given during the trial, Karen was supposedly involved in some sort of sex ring and was interested in seeing other men. In addition to these details, the defense attorney also argued that there was evidence to support the state's description of the murder. He highlighted the fact that if Karen was indeed stomped on the head, why was there no sign of blood in the garage or the car? He also brought into question the state's description of David staging the attempt as an abduction by stating that there was no evidence of David leaving the house that night. Another critical fact that Taylor reiterated was that the medical examiner who had determined Karen's cause of death no longer believed that she had been stomped on the head. The defense held their ground on David injuring his knee again. He went on to claim that even if it were to be assumed that Karen was stomped on the head, doing so would have been impossible for David at the time of the murder. David was on crutches, so he wouldn't have been able to stomp on Karen's head using the injured leg. In addition, his injured leg would not have been able to support his own body weight while he attempted to stomp on her with the other one. This claim was further solidified by testimony of David's physical therapist, who stated that David had had extreme difficulty walking and lifting. The defense lawyer also ruled out the possibility of blood being cleaned up using bleach. The prosecution had cited a picture of bleach near the pool, but Taylor categorized the evidence as insufficient by stating that the murder took place in October, and The pool got bleached during that time of year. Ashley had also testified against what the prosecution claimed. She stated that it was her own mother who moved her to a different room. Her reconciliation of the event was called into question, but she stated that she knew it was Karen who moved her because it's natural to know what one's mother feels like. To solidify her testimony, she even went on to say that she is comfortable going to the grave, believing it was Karen. Apart from this, Ashley also believes that her father's injury alone was enough to refute the prosecution's claims of him stomping Karen. She mentioned that Karen was an athletic woman, and someone in her father's condition at the time of the murder simply could not move or overtake her, to further emphasize David's innocence. Taylor stated that the phone the prosecution was referring to was based on unreliable evidence, and, again, referred to David's condition and inability to commit the murder based on the available information. Linking the phone to the murder does seem a bit far-fetched. It is possible that Karen had forgotten her secret phone at the house, because when going out, she would have woken up after taking a sleeping aid. In addition, the defense did claim that David Swift said he was worried about his wife, Karen, when he reported her missing. "Karen, do you want me to feel sorry on your behalf? Please write down anything." Karen tried to smile. If that concern was genuine and not part of some twisted facade, his behavior that morning was strange. Investigators learned David may have checked Karen's voicemail shortly after her disappearance, an action that could suggest he was searching for clues to her whereabouts. Or something far darker. Despite his claims of concern, the case against David Swift unraveled around its weakest link: the glaring absence of physical evidence. Investigators scoured the Swift residence, Karen's abandoned car, and even David himself. No blood, no DNA, no murder weapon, nothing to definitively place him at the center of a crime scene. The prosecutors scrambled to piece together their theory, suggesting David had used his foot to carry out a brutal act. This claim was met with skepticism, given David's visible physical limitations at the time. Still, suspicion lingered like a dark cloud over David. His controlling tendencies, the turmoil in his marriage, and Karen's desperate bid for independence painted a chilling portrait of a relationship spiraling toward a deadly climax. But in court, the defense had their own grim tale to tell. They argued that the charges against David were not only weak, but politically motivated. With both the sheriff and district attorney facing re-election, the defense claimed Karen's case had been resurrected as a way to satisfy public outcry and bolster their political standing. When the trial finally came to a close, the outcome stunned everyone. The jury acquitted David Swift of first-degree and second-degree murder, as well as attempted first-degree and second-degree murder. But their work wasn't done. On the charge of voluntary manslaughter, the jury reached a stalemate. After hours of deliberation, they informed the judge that they simply couldn't agree. The deadlock resulted in a mistrial in June 2024, leaving Karen's loved ones without closure and David's fate hanging in limbo. But the story didn't end there. During an explosive appearance on 20/20, Kelly revealed that she met David on a dating site 3 years after Karen's death. The two married in 2016, but what began as a whirlwind romance quickly descended into something sinister. Kelly claimed that David stalked her during their marriage and after their divorce, painting a picture of a man who seemed to thrive on control and intimidation. As these allegations came to light, the Tennessee Court of Appeals denied David's legal team's motion to dismiss the voluntary manslaughter charge in Karen's case. David pleaded not guilty, but the weight of both cases, the death of his first wife and the alleged stalking of his second, began to intertwine in haunting ways. David Swift remains in custody, awaiting a new trial for voluntary manslaughter. Meanwhile, Kelly's accusations have led to separate stalking charges against him in Alabama. The chilling complexities of these cases have left everyone involved grappling with a tangled web of suspicion, fear, and unanswered questions. For now, Karen's case remains a shadow that looms over David Swift, a chilling reminder that justice can be as elusive as the truth. Eneju, sa costra. The question remains, is David Swift a man caught in the crosshairs of circumstantial evidence and political ambition? Or is he a master manipulator who has evaded accountability for far too long? The answer may be locked away with secrets only he knows.